Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Bazaar podcast. As per usual, you can find us both on YouTube as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and via RSS feed for your podcast app of choice. To start things off, I am first of your hosts, MetallFenix, and I am joined by my co-host, Sixten,
Yes, I am Sixten. I'm one of the co-hosts.
as well as Walter.
Hi, this is Poppy Field Walter.
And we also have first-time guest Prismat on the show. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, for those who might not know?
Hey everyone, I'm Prismat. I used to be a pro gamer in Heroes of the Storm, and I've also competed a little bit in some other online card games, mostly Legends of Runeterra, and I've been playing Bazaar since closed beta and streaming for most of it as well.
Perfect. And that kind of brings us to what have you been playing? We usually start off with the guest, so go ahead.
I've been playing mostly Dooley, but I've been playing a little bit of Mac leading up to this, to get used to him after the most recent patch change, figure out how his economy works. But I've been really enjoying Dooley. He has a lot of different builds, and the changes to the cores, where you can see most of them every run, allows a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I've been really interested. I think the direction that they went with the changes for Dooley have seemed very fun. I just haven't gotten around to playing it myself yet. I've been caught up with Mac and Vanessa, and we'll get to that later. But it seemed like I didn't even know where to start on how to play the new Dooley. So, why don't you? What do you think are the most like standout things with how he changed, how he plays now instead?
I think there's a couple of cores that stand out as very strong just in general, but then there's a couple others that you can play if you have the specific early game to set up for it. The big one is Armored Core. I think if you have a Duct Tape start or a Defense Grid, then you can probably play for Armored Core and then play for the Force Field one-shot transition, but in general, the Core and Companion Core have been really strong for me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it would be way more powerful now to potentially go armored core, since even though they made duct tape a monster item instead of a dually specific item, you still get to see whether or not you got it before you have to commit to playing that specific core.
Yeah, having that extra time to really figure out your direction before committing to a core is nice. Because beforehand, when you start with a core before you even see a skill, you're just ending up, okay, I'm going to pick the best core that I see, and then you always see the same one or two cores from dualies. But now there's a lot more variety.
It also makes sense. I'm going on a limb here. Companion core is definitely my least played core in total, but I'm guessing that one of the reasons they feel that is strong now is that it's historically been one of the cores that's the most space constrained in the early game, whereas now, of course, by the time you're getting to pick it, you're already up to is it 6 or 8 board spaces, so you have a lot more leeway to play things that are good with the companion core.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where day one, if you didn't get the good RNG to hit level 2, then your companion core would be quite useless. But now you get it day 2, and you're ideally going to have some friends to support it. And I think the early game is still going to be weaker than the other cores, but the scaling with the cooldown reduction that it gets can go pretty crazy in the late game.
Is there anything in particular you've been playing with that in the late game?
It's mostly been Ballista. I did try playing Thermal Lance with it, but that ended up being a bit too weak, taking up too many slots on things that aren't friends, so the core wasn't getting enough charge. But
Right.
Ballista has been quite strong, and then also DJ Robot and Race Carl and stuff like that in the mid game can win a lot of fights.
And what kind of start have you felt is the strongest now with the core changes?
I like the gold start a lot. Dooley has almost no econ items, and a lot of his items that you want to buy can get quite expensive. He also has like a lot of silver start items that you want to buy.
And
So,
I'm
and a lot of small
guessing,
item slots that you want
yeah,
to flex into.
is it also relevant that the early goal lets you kind of hedge more items to sort of see which core you want to go with from there, or?
Yeah, it helps out a decent amount. I think that on Dooley, since his weapon cores are quite bad and his weapons in general aren't that great, going for skills is going to end up being pretty weak a lot of the time because you don't really want weapon damage, it would be okay for the early game. Poison skills is pretty much useless on him, and shield skills are going to be useless as well, unless you're playing Armored Core.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We can move on to Walter. People might be able to guess what you've been playing, but why don't you tell us anyway?
Yeah, I'm like a Poppy Field main now. I mean, I still like obviously with Mac it's a little bit like you're at the mercy of like the first large item you're shown, but I given the choice and given like the choice of what cards I'm holding on to hedge, like I'm pretty soundly convinced that Poppy Field is like the strongest of the three of Moose Snaff, Femur, and Poppy. Like I actually think Poppy is the strongest, even though people are going to be more mad about Femur, and I like understand why. Because it feels like a more unfair card in the mid game. But what I'll say the kind of what I like about Poppy is you are just not on such a clock to win. Like you don't get outscaled by almost anything. You have like your in fight scaling is maybe the some of the most aggressive of any build on any character that exists, right? So like if you have a high poison number on your Poppy Field, it's like you go from like 0 to 1,000,000 so unbelievably fast if you have your board constructed correctly. And for that reason, I think I favor it um over Femur. Like I think the like sometimes you can get a version of Femur where you're like have start of combat, like I have the Lich skill and Icicle or something where you can like actually just start instantly and it's like a one shot. That is like the exception though. I'd say the average Poppy goes deeper into the game, like in terms of still being strong than the average Femur. Even though like on exactly day 3 or day 4, for sure Femur is better, but you just don't you're not as required to win those days as Poppy. So I think that that's why I that's part of the reason why. I mean, I also just find it to be like more fun, right? You get to play off hero items a lot. Like you get to play yo-yo. I got the yo-yo. I got the spider mace. And you get to really like, become like a machine gun. It reminds me a bit of playing like crit core with like a knife set, like stuff like that, where you could actually have like a ton of weapons going off really fast. And it's just very satisfying to see just like your opponent's life total just disappear in like a 750 750 750 1200 and then like a 2000 crit and they're dead, and it's very satisfying kind of play style. And also like you just get to mess around with enchanted items, go to curio all the time. It's just a kind of an engaging, because it's the type of build that you can improve incrementally throughout the later days very easily. Whereas Femur, it's like I'm going to shops looking for my one incense upgrade, and that's like the only upgrade that matters basically. Um, Whereas like on Poppy, you can upgrade everything. Like increasing the poison number on your Poppy field matters. Like leveling up your weapons matters. Finding like new weird off hero weapons like Uzi or Yo-Yo is really important. So there's way more like gameplay down the stretch as Poppy field, I feel, than as Femur. As Femur, you get your build together and then it's like, all right. Maybe you get like a marbles late and that's making you like 1% better or something, but it's just not the same. It's just a more, I just find Poppy to be a more, I don't know, engaging play style, I guess. So that's
Yeah,
why I'm favoring
and
it.
moving on to Sixten, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've been playing a mix of Vanessa and Mac. On Mac, I've been playing mainly Femur, which I grew a bit bored of. I haven't played that much Poppy compared to Walter, but then on Vanessa, I've been trying to really learn her. I feel like currently she's the probably maybe the hero with the highest skill cap in terms of how many viable builds there are and how difficult it is to tell which items are correct to hedge for or go for. So on Vanessa, I've been playing a lot of weapon starts with like Shark Claws, Tempo style, and then in the mid game, I transition. Often I search for a dive weights or like a shot classes, and then I try to find some kind of carry item. It can be for the mid game specifically, like Shark Ray, a Trebuchet, Arbalest, like even Elemental Depth Charge are like a lot of these nice carry items. You can easily, like, you can go from Weapon Vanessa to one of those quite easily. And then in the late game, stuff like, of course, Powder Keg is very powerful. I will say I have a lot more success on Mac, but I don't think that is because Mac is necessarily stronger. I just think Vanessa is very hard to play. So yeah, that's what I've been playing. And what about you, Metal?
Yeah, I'll
What have
echo
you been
that
playing?
sentiment. It's been like very similar for me, where I've been playing a lot of Vanessa, I've been playing a lot of Mac. I've generally been more successful on Mac, but oftentimes it's due to his direction tends to be very clear. I've actually been going for a bit more variety than usual on Mac too. I've had wins with, I had a Glacier Frozen Flame game where I was just playing weapons with flame in the early game and then transitioned to Obsidian Enchanted Lifesteal Frozen Flame. I've had wins where I play, like Proboscis with Moose Staff, and then the usual mix of just some femur games thrown in there too. I've been trying to go for the Poppy Field, but that line seems to be oddly averse to presenting itself to me, so I just haven't gotten a chance to actually play that yet. Whereas Vanessa, a lot more complicated. I think for me, she's my most played character, and it's weirdly almost been a demerit with the way she is currently. I think it would almost have been easier learning her from scratch, because the weirdest thing has been that the lines that used to be strong are bait now, and the lines that used to be complete bait have gotten oftentimes really strong. Stuff like Poppy Field. What am I saying? The puffer fish. I was thinking of poison items and got distracted by Walter's avatar. But no, like puffer fish, for example, I've notoriously not generally been a fan of that. But now with Yeti Crab, it can get some seriously impressive numbers quite quickly. In the same way, before in the past, I used to feel like playing for the catfish early game could be really sketchy. Like, fishing rod used to be a terrible item, but now all of a sudden, if your early game is fishing rod pufferfish, that's surprisingly one of the more solid Plan B starts. Um, you run so with elemental depth charge for the longest time. I felt like that line was only good when you had burn, and it was kind of underwhelming with poison. But now that they buffed up Yeti Crab, all of a sudden it's kind of the opposite, where hedging for a burn starting skill is much less important, because now the Yeti Crab is so strong that if you end up playing Weather Glass or Depth Charge with the Crab instead, yeah, you need twice the amount of poison for it to be as good as Burn, but you totally can just have twice the amount of poison now if you don't have any of the good burn scaling skills. So for me, that's been like the tricky part, is just relearning Vanessa from the ground up to no longer get baited by the lines that used to be strong but aren't anymore.
Well, hasn't the relative value of like burn skill plus lighter, which used to be like insanely good, it's gone down so much. But like not only in raw power, but like relative to catfish and shark claws and every other part thing that's gotten buffed, right?
I do actually still think that burn skills are very strong. Like, they give you new lines. The main issue is that it's actually the relative power of weapon skills that has significantly gone down, due to mainly just the strength of shark claws, where what makes a weapon board strong is largely, did you have shark claws or did you not have shark claws? And if you have red skill and shark claws, that's more damage than you need. You would have won the same fights anyways. And if you have a red skill but no shark claws, a lot of the time that's not strong enough to win, so you might be losing anyways. So when the only thing that kind of tips the scales is that you have to have a burn skill and find a burn item, it makes it feel like the skill start is a bit too conditional, at least to what I've personally been preferring. It definitely
Yeah, but
does
does
give
burn
you.
skill plus lighter even race shark claw? That's what I'm saying.
Oh
Is
yeah,
like it seems like
absolutely. Like if I have burn skill, I win every fight for the first 5 days, hands down, like easily. It's so much burn, especially now that you have higher base values on the lighter and you have the Soracid that goes really well with it. You can put like I've won day 2 with like nothing but events on my board against like weapon players. It's that strong, but the problem is if you either don't find the burn skill or don't find vents or lighter with Zoracid, then you can't really leverage it in the most vital part of the game compared to like Mac, where you can't really brick on your skills and you have so many things that utilize any of the skills that you go for that it's like really difficult to not find something to use it with.
Is
But
the
yeah.
lighthouse transition still viable for a burn skill start?
Yeah, so I feel like Lighthouse has gotten trickier. The main issue that I see with it is the boards that you need to raise now are primarily things like Freeze Pig or even, just Drill Dooley, but a lot of it is Mac. And when you look at Mac, you expect most of the time Femur, if not Femur, something like Poppyfield. And when it comes to those builds, you have to apply a lot of pressure very quickly to actually kill them. And the main issue for me has been that if you just have +6 burn from a burn starting skill, it's never really gonna be enough. However, if you ever find like Draconic Rage, or even just Conflagration, or even just Improvised Burn, anything in the game that lets you scale burn, it can be incredibly powerful, and it's even better if you also find shielded on the lighthouse, because that's kind of the other issue, right? If you have so many board spaces occupied by both your lighthouse and then the slow triggers to activate the lighthouse, outside of maybe Mr. Richardson, it's very difficult to have good defense on your board too. And sometimes that doesn't matter if slow like slows them down by enough, but that's the thing that tends to get so scary with like Pygmalion with the ice club or something. You really do need some amount of defense to get to the point where the burn really kicks in. And kind of the same thing happens against Femur a lot of the time. It's very possible to raise Femur with burn because they tend to have fast starts with hardly working, but once hardly working runs out, they slow down quite a bit. But the problem is, if you didn't have enough bulk to outlast those first 3 or 4 hits, which you need quite a bit of bulk to do, you probably died before their engine started stalling. But if you have both scaling and defenses built into your lighthouse, it can feel really impressive. So, at least from my perspective, the issue has been that build feels like it relies on you finding things that are a little bit out of your control. It's hard to guarantee getting good skills because, hey, maybe Malifang is just feeling shy and he never shows up for you. And there are no Zane skills, the Vanessa skill vendor, that actually scales burn. That's like kind of the annoying thing. Whereas on Mac, it's so easy to find good femur stuff, because anytime you go to Zuzima, his personal skill vendor, you're all but guaranteed to find your upgrades to hardly working. So it becomes trivial, whereas on Vanessa, I'm always just scrambling to actually find something to scale my barn.
Yeah, I tried a bit of Lighthouse as well, or no, more accurately, Anglerfish, which is like
Mm-hmm.
for most of the game, it's just a better Lighthouse.
Only until
They're like
like
equal and
gold, I think. At gold,
No, I think even at
Lighthouse is 2 seconds faster. At
all right,
gold, yeah.
yeah. Wait. Anyway, so I tried like Anglerfish, and I run into the same issue that Metal
Yeah.
described, where you lack defenses is the main problem. I find
Anglerfish is at least a little bit easier to make work, for the main reason of he's one size smaller, which means your board is less constrained, but mainly he's actually tagged as a friend, which means that he works with Saloon, which that's kind of the other big issue with Lighthouse, right? It's a large item that isn't a friend, so trying to run Lighthouse and Saloon on the same board is really tough. And right now, Saloon is one of the best generic directions, and also something you can find early. So
yeah,
the things that honestly, Trebuchet runs into the same issue, right? Trebuchet is overall easier to build around, because Shark Claws is insane scaling for that item, especially with like a figurehead. But you still can't run it effectively with Saloon, so you'd have to play it with like piano or figurehead or any of those things. But
I
at
mean,
least it
Saloon really
still
wants to be
has
your only
lines.
large item, right? That's just the
Yeah.
design of it. It's just it's just hard to get away
And
from
the
that.
thing that makes Saloon scary is that it lets you easily run things like Mr. Richardson, which is kind of a menace, honestly. That boy gets so much shielding. It easily lets you field, if you just go to the armor health vendor, if you find any friend with shield on it, like a shielded pufferfish, shielded anglerfish, shielded catfish, they scale insanely. I've even ran it with like shielded torpedo. In theory, it should work just fine with like a seaweed or something. When you aren't as constrained on space and you already have a lot of haste triggers for your side of the board as well, Vanessa currently has way more viable defensive options than she does when you're stuck playing Lighthouse.
I feel
yeah.
like I see a lot of orange Julian in my games, honestly. How do you guys do you literally just buy it every game, sit on
No,
it, and then
never.
decide if you're
No,
gonna do it
he's
later?
bad. I've tried making him work multiple
Okay,
times, and he just
I
doesn't.
swear to God, like
I don't know.
70% of my Vanessa opponents have this card in play. It's
If
so
if
popular.
they have Orange Julian, I have yet to lose to it. Every single time they have that item, it just means that I win.
I'm
Also,
not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying everyone is playing it,
I had to double
especially
check,
in
and
one weapon. Especially in one weapon.
Anglerfish at gold is 8 seconds and 20 burn, which is the same as Lighthouse. So it's Lighthouse is literally strictly worse than Anglerfish until Diamond, which is kind of wild.
Oh,
I
does
don't know how that.
Lighthouse start at gold now?
No, it started silver. So like, I don't know how
Oh
this
yes, it's
happened.
10, 10, 8, 6. That's
No,
what
yeah,
it
they
is.
changed
Yeah,
it in the
yeah,
most
yeah.
recent patch.
Yeah,
But
No,
so it's so
I had the
bizarre.
numbers wrong.
There is. I don't know how this happened, but this is the first time I think we've had like one item from the same hero just to be like strictly better than
Well, to be
another.
fair,
No,
it's
it's
not
definitely not the
actually
first time
it's
that's
both not
happened.
the first time, and it is not strictly
Oh,
better.
katana and rifle, right?
Yeah,
Would be
a
another
bunch
Yeah,
example, I
of, there's
guess.
and there's
been like
others
there's
too.
been a
There's ones on
bunch of
Julie.
examples, yeah. But the main
No, but
thing
literally
too
the
is
same
that,
text is my point. Like the same text,
well,
just
they don't
smaller
have the
size.
same text though necessarily, because one is a large property, which are two relevant tags, and the other one is a medium friend, which are tags that have other relevancies. So it's not like they actually have the same text. There's definitely
Oh
like
yeah,
a
find the tags. Yeah, the
yeah,
tags are different, but the
there's a
text on like the.
disparity between the balance of them for sure currently, where anglerfish feels a lot easier to utilize, but that doesn't change the fact that they are inherently cards that go on very different boards. They have less
Yeah, that's fair.
overlap than you'd think. But yeah, to bring it back to Orange Julian, the big thing that I see as the issue with him is that single weapon builds are already very space constrained, and the fact that you're letting your friend take up 2 spaces just means that it's one less slot where you're running utility, and he's insanely vulnerable to disruption, which is already a weakness of single weapon builds. Because if you have an item with that slow of a start that you don't have any easy ways of getting start of combat haste on, like, it's not like you can haste him with quick ignition or toxic injection or holsters or aquatic rush. Like, there's almost nothing that works to make his start faster. And if he gets frozen, then that just means that between Crow's Nest and Julian, you're out like 5 spaces on your board. And then, in my experience at least, I just tend to roll them.
Yeah, I agree. He has too many weaknesses relative to the reward you get for
Yeah.
committing to him.
And I do think, like, I've heard at least Retro say that when the stars align, he can be powerful. Especially, like, with Sniper, he turns that into a one-shot machine, like, way earlier and stuff like that. But I've personally felt that there's already so much you want to spend your resources on hedging on Vanessa that it felt way too speculative to pick up a medium bronze item that needs to scale and only hits niche boards.
Yeah. All right, so topic of the week.
Yes,
Are we ready to
I
move on?
thought that we would talk a little bit about on the topic of gold and hedging and things. Um, Gold in the bazaar, what is it really for? It's something that I oftentimes get a lot of questions regarding when it's like, oh, why'd you go income start on this hero, or why'd you go income start on that hero, and which shops should you be willing to reroll, and how much gold you want to spend on chocolates, and a lot of stuff like that. And I think it's understandable because the dynamic between gold as a resource in the bazaar and everything else is actually surprisingly complex. There are a lot of factors to it, but I think I can sort of start by just laying out kind of my rough concept for it, and then everyone can chime in because I think we'll all have slightly different but similar ways of looking at it. And the first thing that I think you should point out is, well, 2 things. One, the reason you go income as a start isn't to have the most gold over time. It's especially because it gives the most gold initially, and over the first 3 to 5 days, it can cause a large gold gap. So whether or not you want to pick that start has a lot to do with what does the gold do for you on those days, which we'll get into later. And then the other thing that really just needs to be pointed out is that gold doesn't do anything if you aren't spending it. You don't get stronger by having more gold. You have more resources when you have more gold, but at the end of the day, as we oftentimes point out, the later in the game you go, the higher the bar for how good your board needs to be grows, and not even entirely linearly. It becomes a lot harder to win on day 11 than it is to win on day 10 a lot of the time. And it just gets worse as the days go on, which means that gold used early can disproportionately affect your odds at winning the early fights. So yeah, why don't we take it from there? Prismat, for starters, how do you usually look at gold and your economy in this game?
I think the big thing to consider, one of the big things to consider, is how many economy items the hero gets access to.
Mm-hmm.
Like playing Mac this week, he has such easy access to chunk of gold generation that past the early game, you have infinite gold. I've been taking the income start on him, but then seeing day 5 plus, I have 50 or more gold, and wondering what am I doing with all of this? So I'm thinking probably I would change to take a gold skill instead on him. Whereas on Dooley, Dooley has 2 econ items total, so he has no way to generate gold. And even in the late game, I'm finding with a gold start. I'm still lacking gold quite a lot of the time. And in the early game as well, it's a much bigger deal on Dooley. I think he has a lot more flex items you want to buy, whereas on Mac, there's just a few medium items you want to buy, and then you can stick to that board for a much longer time.
Yeah, I very much feel the same way usually about Vanessa right now, and this is true for Bug Dooley in the previous patch as well, but when you have a lot of items you want to hedge and a lot of upgrades that are meaningful, that's when you should care a lot about your gold in the early game. On Vanessa right now, upgrading a lot of her items, like the vents to make them go from 3 burn to 6 burn, that's a massive upgrade. Getting double the scaling on a shark claws. She just has a ton of items that get very meaningfully bigger when you upgrade them, which means you're expecting to spend a lot of gold on rolling and upgrading, which in turn means that you're going to need a lot more of the gold. But whenever I'm playing Mac, a lot of the time I feel like I don't need to be too attached to my gold, which makes me very willing to just spend it on chocolates, to roll at Curio, to just look for whatever makes you strong on the day that you're talking about, because I know that bar maybe like saving up to buy gold upgrades for Femur or Poppy or to find library or something much later in the game, I'm not going to be punished by having a low amount of gold in my bank.
Yeah,
Walter,
so I
let's
can.
Sixten,
sorry.
perfect, yeah. Chime in
Okay,
there.
so I think, and this kind of ties into the start you pick, that I agree with MetallFenix and also Prismat that gold matters far more in the early game than it does in the late game, in the sense that you get a lot more bang for your buck with having a gold advantage early usually. But this varies from hero to hero. So my choice between gold skill and income usually boils down to which option helps me win the early game the most, which might sound counterintuitive because income doesn't maybe strike something that helps you win early. But for example, on Mac, income used to be the difference between being able to afford a really good board and gold chocolate twice, whereas not clicking income meant you lost out on health, and health was like your main weak point. And same on Dooley in a few metas where so long as you found your rocket launcher, you kind of could just use the rocket launcher to win the early game. And that made gold skills a lot more attractive because both the burn skills and the weapon skills had a lot of synergy with rocket launcher. And rocket launcher is a very cheap item, so you didn't need to necessarily spend a lot of gold. And then in the late game, gold is kind of interesting, right? Because you can kind of win this game either by having a ton of gold on day 12, or you can have no gold at all. Like, it kind of depends on the hero and your strategy. On Duel, sometimes your board, and this might be true for other heroes as well, like probably Flagship Vanessa might be the same. Your board is kind of finished by day 7. Like, your item, you have all the items you need. You don't need to upgrade them anymore.
I mean, it's true for
So
Femur too. That's what I was saying in
yes,
the
so
intro.
at that point, gold becomes this abstract thing where
I will chime in there. I think it's way less true for Femur, partially because library is such an expensive yet powerful
yes, I
upgrade.
agree.
I
That's
also
why I
Yeah,
didn't
but
use
it's
Mac.
one card that's
Yeah,
just like
I
one card that you have
utilize
to see in a shop. Yeah.
library a lot, and I dig very aggressively for finding the final upgrades to my things like the incense or even incorporating hourglass onto the board. So at least the way I play Femur, I scale it for much longer and much harder than I ever would any kind of single weapon Vanessa comp.
Yeah, but so a different dually example would be force field, which is polar opposite from, for example, a drill build or something that is
Yeah.
complete by day 9. Where on force field, I need to be able to afford a diamond upgrade for my defense grid. I need to afford a surprise diamond bunker. There are like a lot of super duper expensive things that you can stumble across that just are so
Yeah,
good that you
chrono
have to be able to
barrier
afford them.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, chrono barrier. Like,
Yeah.
it is force field is a very expensive build if it needs to be, which it usually wants to be. So what I want to say is that, like, on some builds I'm fine with having 0 gold on day 12. On other builds, I am even with 80 gold, I'm like, oh, I could use a bit more gold here just in
Yeah.
case. So I think it's very dependent on the build.
I will also point out that don't conflate this for meaning the more expensive a build is, the better it scales. There are some examples of this being the case, most noteworthy, of course, Pygmalion's whole character identity is effectively the ability to turn money into power on the board. And a lot of the time, the builds that do care about expensive upgrades are the builds that will scale the hardest, but there are some really noteworthy exceptions, like Keg Vanessa, where you actually oftentimes care about improving your board, but you improve your board by buying very inexpensive small items. Like you might really care about a silver lighter or a silver incendiary rounds, or just even upgrading like Vanessa's amulet from gold to diamond just isn't very expensive. So there are very scaling builds that don't care much about gold, the same way that there are builds that spike early but care a ton about gold.
Is that a pattern with Vanessa in general, where she doesn't have the same quality of gold tier items?
No, it's actually changed a lot recently, especially in regards to. So before, the upgrades were more of like a tax on your centerpieces. Like when something like pufferfish would gain cooldown reduction, it more meant that, hey, if you don't upgrade this, it's just not going to do anything, so you have to upgrade it. But now a lot of Vanessa's item upgrades actually give raw power. Pufferfish and anglerfish, and these are two of the big reasons why they're way less skill reliant too, go from 10 to 20 to 30 of burn and poison respectively. And at the end of the day, if you just have a 30 burn anglerfish, that's kind of a lot of burn for a self-charging item. But it also means that a lot of the time you actually want all things on your board to be upgraded. You really care about the figurehead upgrade, but just as much you're going to care about the depth charge upgrades, but you want that to be paired with a highly upgraded crab. And if your payoff involves like the anglerfish, you want that upgraded, but you also want the saloon upgraded, but you also care about upgrades onto your holster and your amulet and your Mr. Richardson and even your shot glasses. So a lot of the, like, I would call them good stuff builds, where you rely less on specific synergies and much more on having individually powerful cards with just barely enough overlap to still be powerful together. They become way more gold hungry because the average quality of your items matter, whereas Keg is the opposite, where it's an entirely Keg-centric board, which means that that's the only piece that you need really highly upgraded, and then if you have like gold holsters and gold amulet, it's probably not a big deal. So I would say that it varies a lot between those two styles of Vanessa build, the synergistic combo or the haphazard good stuff. I just put whatever on my board builds.
I was going to ask Prismat about Dooley. Right now, Prismat, for you, what are like the items that need upgrades the most on Dooley? Because I know the cores seem to be very upgrade hungry, but is there anything else like you prioritize upgrading currently?
Like with the level 7 upgrades and things like that? Or
Yeah, but also in like
even just
shops or
hunting
like
for them in shops, yeah.
yeah, like are upgrades something that is important for you on Dooley? Because in the past, it's been sometimes you have items at bronze on day 12, and those items are your win conditions. Like a drill or whatever. Like I'm just curious how if it has changed with the new patch and such.
I think with the core cooldown reduction scaling, scrap metal is even more important now. So that's always something
Okay.
expensive to be able to buy. And it also opens up a few other gold items in general. Like I think charging station is another item that can be abused very heavily with the core builds. And in general with Dually, there's always all the small items that you're having playing on your board to enable your core. You're always going to have the LEDs and the first aid and GPU and items like that to
Yeah.
always enable yourself, and metronome. So there's always a lot of small items that you want to upgrade.
So you still go to shops in like the late game as well. You don't start
Yeah,
just picking
definitely.
gumballs. Okay, cool.
No, definitely not gumballs.
All right.
Yeah. One final thing before we move on to more generally discussing the state of the meta is that also do want to point out two things where gold is very noteworthy. One is that chocolates are exponentially more powerful the earlier in the game that you buy them, because the health that you get is a much larger proportion of your total health. So at the end of the day, by the end of the game, when you start clicking like snack time and you start getting the later levels and Finn's 5% boost starts being really meaningful, all that stuff, you'll always end up with a relatively similar final health, regardless of whether or not you invested gold into the chocolates. But both when it comes to chocolates and when it comes to re-rolling, the main thing that you have to understand is that what you're paying for is the efficiency of your hour. Where if you go to a shop and then you leave and then you go to another shop, you've now seen 6 items, but it's cost you 2 hours. If you just went to one shop and rolled, you've now seen 6 items in just the one shop, which means that you effectively only paid the cost of the roll to gain, quote unquote, an additional hour, which is incredibly powerful. And that's why such a big part of economy management in the early game boils down to determining which hours you should spend saving gold and which shops that you should use that gold to effectively duplicate. Especially some of the more expensive shops, like Tox Clocks, feels incredibly good to roll currently on both, in my opinion, Vanessa and Mac. Because for Mac, you can get incense, you can also get runic, you can get smelling salts. There are so many
You can
key
get
items.
Magnus's femur.
Magnus's femur itself too, yeah. There are so many really key items that you can get from specifically that shop that more often than not, the steep reroll cost is very worthwhile. And it's the same thing on Vanessa. It's got saloon, it's got holsters, it's got shot glasses, like a lot of your really key items, but also the stuff like the pufferfish and the anglerfish and the what have you. So,
Yeah, can I just jump in because I do
yeah.
want to talk about like kind of this idea of scarce resource, right? Like
Yes.
so when when you have a income start or the chunk of whatever 20 gold start, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
you invert the scarce resource compared to the skill start, right? So when you have the skill start, your scarce resource is gold for like days one, for the first, I would say for day one and the first half of day two. So for the two nodes that precede Rogue Scrapper, right? And your job with the skill start is to convert the number on your skill into a like damage number, right? So that you can kill Rogue Scrapper. Because that's really like yes, skill is good for winning PvP day one, but the real thing in my mind that skill is really good at is skill makes it so that you can beat Rogue Scrapper with almost anything. Especially as Mac, where you have access to a lot of regen and also poison are both good against Rogue Scrapper. So like you don't need very many good items to beat Rogue Scrapper with skill start.
To be
And
fair,
so
I will say I think Rogue Scrapper is completely trivial to beat even without skill start on a special
well, yeah,
item.
right, but it's easy for non-skill start also because you're shopping because you're spending more gold and
No, no, no. Like
shopping
as
more.
in, I
So
mean,
it's like
like
you
I think
manage
if
the
you have Quill and Ink and Venomander both at bronze and nothing else in your entire board, it solos Rogue
yeah, yes,
Scrapper.
for sure. But I don't want to like if I'm skill start, I don't want to buy Quill and Ink or Venomander. Those are trash items. Like that's what I'm saying is like your scarce resource is different, right? If I start with 20 gold, then I don't really care very much about the losing 1 gold to buy Quill and Ink and Venomander so that I beat Scrapper. If I'm starting skill, I care very much about that 1 gold because I also really want to get a board that is going to win PvP, and Quill and Ink and Venomander is probably not going to win PvP, right? So it's like the constraint is gold when your skill start, and the constraint is like the hours when your gold start. And I think that it's like almost an opposite kind of mindset you should take, right? Like you should
I
take
would kind of disagree, where I think the constraint in both cases is very much the time. The only difference is that with
well, it's like you
skills,
can always just click a node. Like, okay, so in the early game, you can almost always click a node for 3 or 4 gold on every
right?
hour, right? So so yes, there's always like this like exchange rate of like 3.5 golds per hour available for like both sides of the equation, so to
Hmm.
speak. So like in the sense that like a reroll is also like 3 gold. Like half the shops have a 2 gold reroll and half the shops have a 4 gold reroll,
Yeah.
right? So like there's kind of like this equivalent exchange where like if you have gold, then rerolling is like quote unquote cheap because it's cheap from an hour's perspective, especially if it's a 2 gold reroll. And if you have skill, then rerolling is relatively expensive, but if you're at a shop where it's going to give you the item that makes your skill good, then it's almost always worth it to do. And also curio is almost always worth it to do. So like there's kind of um you kind of have to like filter your brain to say like, all right, where am I at in terms of, there's a couple of key things. One is like, where am I for TFM, right? Do I have a TFM thing? Um, and then also like, where am I in terms of like, how many nodes have I shopped at? Because I don't think you can shop if you start skill and you shop at more than 1 hour on day one. I think you're at a very big disadvantage. But that said, you almost always, especially as Mac, have to shop at the first hour. So those two things are kind of in tension. But the good thing is that if you shop at the first hour and you take a weapon skill as Mac, um, you can kind of take your pick of the fight you want, and then you're really likely to get a Fang, or not really likely. You're reasonably likely to get a Fang or Toxic Fang or something that can use your weapon skill really well. So there's this kind of like, yeah, there's just this balance of like what is my scarce resource for each day, and as you get further and further into the game, the scarcity of gold drops off a cliff, to be
Yeah.
honest. And especially if, and Pig is kind of a weird exception because Pig has all these super inefficient ways to turn like a boatload of gold, let's say,
Yeah.
into a little bit of power, and that's sort of like his unique mechanic. So let's set Pig aside for a second, but like as one of the other characters, as soon as you know Death Knight Reaper or whatever drops his 50 gold scythe that you're going to sell, like your gold problems are over for the
So
rest of the
that's
game.
what I think is interesting. I have not found that to be the case at all as of late, where a lot of the
As Mac
time,
or as Vanessa?
both. It just depends on what my priorities are, but it can vary a lot. Where depending on the build, I might keep being incredibly gold hungry, especially because at the end of the day, finding a legendary item to sell for 50 gold will only pay for a single like large diamond item if that's something your build cares about, or
Yeah, but like
you pretty
as
much spend all of it on a single 40 gold skill at a skill vendor. I
Yeah, but like
think
you don't get offered like, okay, so yes, that could happen, and it's like good to have, like it's good to walk around with 50 gold, because what if you get a diamond skill? But like, in what percentage of games do you actually outright purchase a diamond skill for 40 gold? It's actually not
a
that high a
fairly high
percentage.
percentage lately, yeah.
No, well,
I
not in
think
my
I think
games.
it's more common that you find the skill trainer late than it is that you get the legendary drop.
Yeah.
What do you?
I
Sorry, I mean, it's more common that you see a skill vendor, but that's not the same as outright wanting to buy a 40 gold diamond skill. Like
I've found myself willing to pay for very expensive skills in the majority of my games.
Right, but okay, but you're not like okay.
No,
You're
I
willing to
find
pay for
skills. I
them. You're
find
willing to
things
pay
that
for
I have
them.
to spend a lot of money on in the majority of my runs. Like
Yeah, but that's like
it's
that's
happened
okay, but you're not
multiple
evaluating it.
times
But you're not
that I've
evaluating it against the
what?
like you're not. It still has a cost, even when
Yeah.
you're spending. Even when you're spending, like okay, there's a cost to carry around the gold that you have if you're earmarking it for a 40 gold or a 40 gold skill. You're not required to play that way.
No,
You
so
can just
what I'm just
you're not
opposing to
necessarily
is
like
the
increasing your win
concept
percentage by
that
playing that way, even if you are buying the skill.
yeah, I'm just
So like
saying that as of late, it has definitely not felt like a single legendary drop means I do not need to care about money for the rest of the run.
well
That's just not
on
the
Mac you have
case.
like infinite money. Like that's what I'm trying to say is like you like
I think I
once you're
agree
in the
with that
mid
on Mac,
game,
but on other
sorry.
heroes not as much. I agree on Mac. Mac has so much
Yeah, like I just feel
income.
like like let's say I get a 50 gold to drop or whatever. It's like I could then just go into a shop if I didn't already have one and buy like a gold calcinator and suddenly now I have infinite money. Like you can just spend it on
That's
a
the
way to
thing,
get
though.
more
Like,
money.
I not to diminish the fact that Mac has an easier time managing his economy than Dooley or Vanessa, but a gold calcinator is a net gain of like, what is it, 6 gold per day or something?
It's a bit more
No,
than that. You sell the gold
it's more
item.
than that because you sell the gold item
Yeah,
too
so
for
it's
yeah,
what,
it's
10
like
per
plus
day?
10.
10
Yeah,
per day. Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
meaningful amount, but I feel like it's kind of going to cause some confusion for people if we call plus 10 gold every day infinite money.
Well, what I mean is that like I just don't feel like I don't know how to say it. I don't feel um like the cost like I'm missing out on stuff that I want to buy because I don't have the money. Like when I am navigating through the later portions of the game as Mac, I feel like I'm able to afford everything I want with few exceptions. And then part of
Right.
that is like a lot of the stuff I want as Mac, especially if I'm playing like Poppy Field, for example, is like from pearls or like from the toy. It's like you're hunting for some specific stuff, or you also like to take the loot option a lot as Mac. That's the other thing is like you really like monster loot as Mac, and you also really like the loot option from level up. So that's like another source of gold where like in the late game, there's just gold coming at you from all directions, right? There's pearls, there's monster drops, there's free fights. There's just a lot of gold coming at you, and like, sure, is it hyperbolic to say like, all right, once you get Scythe on day 9, you'll never be able to not afford? Sure, it's hyperbolic, right? Like that's
Well,
fine,
so the
but
main
it's
thing that I
just
wanted to illustrate is that it's true for Mac right now, but it's mainly true for Mac right now because I don't think he has that many meaningful things to dump a lot of money on. His current builds don't necessarily utilize skills to the most amazing degree of anything in the game, and there's also the case of with stuff like Good Stuff Vanessa, you're way more willing to just outright buy higher rarity enchanted items because you're so invested in your average board quality. I've had games recently where I'll go to the health armor shop and I'll outright spend 64 gold on like a diamond shielded torpedo or something. Or like
yeah. I mean, I guess you Mac doesn't even get Kev, so there's the
yeah. So I think a
so
big part of
that
it,
doesn't
and
even
that's
happen, but
why, like, I
yeah.
agree with you that right now on Mac, 100%, a legendary item usually tides you over. I just wanted to illustrate the fact that I don't think it's because he's Mac as much as because he's Mac right now, and I could see with future expansions or balance changes, his priorities might shift in a way that makes gold suddenly much more meaningful, the same way that Dooley was way more constrained for gold when keeping 48 tucked away to buy a diamond robotics factory was like a very real thing that you actually needed to consider because it would like decide your run. So I think it's true right now, but I think it's important to tie it less to the character as an abstract and more to the
Sure.
character in this
Yeah,
point.
it is okay. Yes, obviously everything is like a transient balance state. That's kind
Mhm.
of true of anything we say. Like,
But
they
I
could
think,
go
and
turn
that's
Vanessa
like,
into pig tomorrow if they wanted to,
yeah,
and that
but
like
that's also like, I think that's the crux of the matter to why this is so hard for people sometimes to wrap their head around, because I think the value of an hour in the bazaar is relatively fixed. An hour is always incredibly valuable, the same way that exp is always kind of, at least so far, we haven't had a way to trivialize exp to the point where there might be a character where exp isn't considered a scarce resource. But gold is weird because the value of gold tends to be completely just relevant to external factors, such as what meaningful upgrades can your build actually hit. So the value of having 100 gold on day 10 on one character, and even from build to build versus another character and another build, can be completely different. Either that can be a superfluous pile of something that's practically a waste, or it can be the thing that spikes you the upgrade that gets you to a win on day 16.
Yeah. So I think we can move on to state of the meta here.
Yep.
Well, there are a
And
couple of
oh,
things
sorry,
I
no, of
wanted to
course, yeah,
bring up.
Okay.
yeah, sure. Go ahead, go
Just
ahead.
specific examples, specific situations. I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on it because I have like a rule of thumb, I guess, where if you
Mhm.
see chocolates in the early game, how much gold do you need to have where you will spend it on the gold chocolates?
10 gold.
I'm
10.
thinking that
10 gold, yeah.
10
10.
gold. So you'll just have 10 gold. You'll spend it all, and then
absolutely.
Very
If
frequently,
even at
chocolates
the
is
yes.
my
cost of
first
missing out.
node on
Yeah.
day 3, and I have 10 gold, I will almost always
Okay, so
Actually,
it's
hit
that
on
the
Mac,
important to
chocolates.
you, or is
Yeah.
but is
on
it
Mac,
different on Mac?
No,
it's
that
six
is
gold
on
for me.
Mac.
thinking-
I will sell my stash for gold chocolate bars if need be.
Yeah.
If I like, uh, for Mac, a gold chocolate bar is like essential to winning day 2 and 3. Like that is the best node by far. On Duel, I won't sell stuff for gold chocolate, but I will make sure to have 10 gold lying around. Basically,
Okay,
and
so
then
you're
Sometimes
for
on
Pig
Mac
valuing
and
I
it.
do the
Vanessa,
thing
Same
where
on
if I
Vanessa,
have
yeah.
on Mac, sometimes if I have Catalyst but no lead maker, then I'll buy gold chocolate, eat 4 and transform the last one, and it's kind of like
You get some money back.
yeah, it's kind of like a way to
Yeah.
recapitalize on buying like Aludel or Mortar and Pestle on day 1 or day 2, because those are really great items that you definitely want to buy. But sometimes if you don't have the other, you don't really want to buy Calcinator at bronze, in my
So
opinion.
I will
So
say there are basically two exceptions for me. One, and this is especially true if you're playing Pygmalion, if you are weak enough that most likely gold is just never going to be enough for you to win. Because currently I think he's the only character that I've played where I've been like quite willing to actively throw days, just because at least many points in the past there have been cases where there just aren't things that you can spike that make you win unless you have specific skills or you already have something that can stack burn. Then I'm willing to pass up on chocolates because hey, it's not gonna matter. By the time I get strong, I'll have health. And the other exception is that sometimes if I'm already really strong, especially on Vanessa, I might be willing to buy silvers if I care. If I think to myself, I'm 90% confident that I'll win with just silvers, and there's some upgrade that I'd like to hit on the same day, I might buy silvers, but this is especially like, if I have something that's very fast and very strong, like double barrel on the patches where that item has been kind of overtuned with like a left-handed on top or something. But right now, when you actually care about Shark Claw's scaling, or you care about your catfish getting to scale, or your barn getting to stack, I pretty much always buy gold, at least for my first one, until I'm very strong in maybe like the mid game. Then I chill on my spending a little bit. But those are like the two exceptions. If I'm so strong that I can't see myself losing, or I'm so weak that I can't see myself winning. But otherwise, I don't think I've like ever regretted just full spending on chocolate to make sure that I don't get screwed over in a PvP.
I also want to add, specifically since the last patch or two, the buff to Scout Trooper for a lot of heroes and
Yeah.
builds means that unless you buy gold chocolate, you literally it doesn't matter how strong you are otherwise for some builds. Like you literally cannot beat him unless you have that extra health. So it is also a way to ensure that no matter what happens, if I see Scout Trooper tomorrow, I will still have a chance because of this chocolate,
I
which is
also think
important.
it kind of matters for the Flame Juggler on the subsequent day too. Having gotten like
Oh yeah,
2
for
gold
sure.
chocolates
Yeah,
makes
on
me a
day
lot
5.
And
more
Hydra Dude as well,
confident.
or sorry, Prince Marianas.
Yeah.
Like there are fights that just are like health checkers. You will
Mhm.
not beat them if you have too low health or XP or whatever.
Or just
And
in
he meant
general.
Hoover Bike Hooligan, not Scout
Yes,
Trooper, by the
true.
way, also.
Hoover by
Oh
Cooligan.
my god, they need to stop changing the names all the time.
But yeah, I
So
think.
Prismat, what about you?
Yeah, what's
Well, I
your
was
view
I
You
was
of
thinking that especially on Mac, since he is so reliant on silver large items for his builds to really give him direction, that you always want to hold some kind of buffer of gold, some amount of buffer to be able to buy them if they show up in a shop. But maybe I guess the odds of that are too low for that to
Yeah,
be
so for
impactful.
It's not
me,
that I don't have the buffer, it's that I'm just willing to sell all my
yeah,
cards to buy
You just
I
them.
sell your whole board. Okay, you just always have your board as your
and
bank.
I also always like I hedge a lot more for that on like day 4, day 5, where it's not that hard to have an okay amount in your stash.
Okay, so it's just as long as you can build up that buffer again for day
Yeah,
4, day 5, then you're going to
on
be
day
okay.
3, like the day 3 node 1 situation is like that's the moment where you have a potential Hoover by Cooligan 2 hours from now, and you like are at the maximum possible value of gold chocolate. And I think it's fine if you give up your ability to buy femur for the rest of day 3 to do that. Like I
Yeah.
think that that's actually correct, and also I think that on day 3 exactly, you're not as likely to find it as you are on day 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So I think that like on day 4, maybe I'll buy silver sometimes. I think on day 3, I'm like pretty disciplined, and I'm like always getting gold or doing the thing where I eat 4 and then transform the 1 to recoup, which
Yeah,
I think is
once
actually
it
like a really good
really
play, by the way.
feels like you've like crested that hill where it starts getting health isn't quite as extremely important, I become a lot more willing to just say like, hey, let's get some silver chocolates. It's still twice as efficient in terms of time spent. It's pretty good, but I don't feel like I'll live or die by this bonus 50, but I might care
And you
about my
also
fight
feel like
gold.
there's other nodes that are in the pipeline that are comparable. Like once snack time
Yeah,
becomes
yeah.
competitive with chocolates, and once later when Fins becomes competitive with chocolates, it's like it just doesn't
I
feel
really like,
worthwhile anymore.
once you get to at least level 4, I'm always quite willing to just take a snack time to skip a chocolate. Because, like, yeah, it's only 80, but then we're starting to be at the point where all of those increments have added up to where I'm not
Do you remember when
that
snack time
scared
was
for a
insanely
spin.
OP? Remember when it was 30 per level? It used to be so good.
Yeah, you just slam that every time you never need
Yeah, it used to be
chocolates.
like an auto click. All right, well,
But yeah.
Okay.
Did you have any
I guess
other
did you
one
have?
reason for my
specific?
thoughts on that,
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, go on.
I love getting knee brace from Curio, so that
Oh, it's
probably affects
so
how
good.
oh
often.
It's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
good.
If you have
Like,
knee brace, does that change your decision to buy chocolates?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
for
yes,
sure,
yes.
for
for sure.
sure.
That is a chocolate replacement,
Also,
basically.
I think on Vanessa, especially, getting early, even a bronze arm stealer can really quickly, like, it just means that as you're assembling your board, you'll get like 100 to 200 extra health over the first few days. It relieves a lot of that pressure on buying gold chocolates. I even think on Mac, if I find my silver skill to be backroom dealings, I usually feel like I'm fine for health for the rest of the run. I'll just keep pressing shops.
Yeah, well, on Mac you want to go to. I mean, it's in Backward Dealings is sick just because you want to go to so many shops in the
Mhm.
middle part of the game, and so you get it like right before the. It's like it's like you don't want to go to shops while they give only bronze stuff, and
I
then as soon as
will.
they're giving silver larges, you want to go to like every shop.
I
So the
also
Backward
think
Dealing comes in at the perfect time to be like to give you the maximum value
one
for it.
that has happened to me, I think like yesterday or something too, is on the early days, if you're playing a build where you know that like so on Vanessa, if you're playing like aquatics on Vanessa, it can be fairly straightforward to be hoover by Cooligan without having like a crazy amount of health because seaweed is powerful. Or if you're playing the burn or shark claw
Yeah, I
stuff,
think like
like
doesn't like Brick Buddy still beat him pretty easily? Like I
yeah,
think if
I've
you have
also like I've
defensive scaling, like
outright
you
killed
actually
him
beat
with
him.
like
Yeah.
no bonus health with just shark claws because they scale so ridiculously. But it means that if before my day 2 PvP I'm faced with the choice of relax or chocolates on Vanessa at least, a lot of the time I'm quite willing to press relax because it's a bigger spike then and there. And it also just means that I get to win the fight that I cared the most about while saving my 10 gold.
That's
All right.
interesting. I don't know if I've ever
Are
done that,
we?
but I definitely can see the logic of it. I can
Yeah,
also it's
I
like
think
kind of
it's
like
like on Mac, I probably wouldn't because he's so reliant on that health later. But on
yeah.
Vanessa, there are a few lines where like you really boost your odds in the PvP and you don't care as much about the health later.
So I really want to pick your guys' brain on this. And we can move on to state of the
Hmm.
meta. Which hero do you guys think currently is the strongest? Because I think this is the arguably or inarguably the meta where there is the most disagreement between the order of power of the heroes. Like there isn't a I think
I'll
compared to
start
other
because
metas,
my answer is
sure.
really quick. At this point,
Okay.
I've truly started feeling like I genuinely do not know. Just because it
Yes.
seems so different depending on not even who you're asking, but who you're looking at play. I've seen so many Pygmalions that feel like they're like oppressively powerful in the meta, and then you watch some streams, you just see a guy like take 0 wins twice, and you go, "How on earth is that a playable hero?" You know, like. So it's so hard to gauge, I think, but I'll leave the floor open.
Would you say specifically the strongest hero for getting to 10 win runs?
Yeah, that's I guess a good
Yeah, you always have to
question.
qualify it for that
Yeah,
because
because
there's
I
also
think
like the
Yeah,
yeah.
good
Pig is the
point.
strongest hero for showing up and just killing your run in the late game, but is he the best hero to play as?
That is a
So
good distinction.
it's
Yeah.
weird, yeah, because I've seen a guy in one of I don't remember whose community it was, but one of the streamer discords that I'm in, there was a guy who like won just I think it was 18 straight on Pygmalion or something, which is probably the biggest win streak I've seen on a hero like this patch. And it was just repeatedly forcing luxury keywas, especially with like Deed and stuff. And he said that he just got it to come together extremely reliably and consistently, and then you just close out the run by being the
Yeah, I
easy
actually think
hero.
luxury Kiwas is essentially like has the same scaling numbers as the unnerfed calcinator. So
Yeah.
like it actually scales at almost exactly the same speed as the unnerved calcinator did, and also Pig gets this really stupid node which has that just has double the value of your leftmost item, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
so like they just so like they'll have a item that already scaled really good for the speed of the game, and then they'll also be able to hit this node that just gives their item just doubles their item power, which is so like as we've seen with doubling in the past, like doubling is
Hmm.
the most dangerous mechanic or whatever. Like, or one of the the other one would be a charge, I guess. But historically, doubling has been whatever form that takes, whether it's multicast, which we just saw a bunch of multicast items get nerfed, whether it's the uh whatever balcony stuff like the old deed like doubling mechanics have
Yeah.
been historically problematic in the game, and so that node especially is like really revealing how like that's a problematic node in my opinion, an OP node, and I think the luxury Kios build is really revealing how stupid it is. Like, if you've just been killed, like they just have fort and then like obsidian kiosk with, and it just hits you for 4,000. It's just too much, right?
But then at the same
Um,
time, so it's been like kind of this spectrum where I feel also like Pygmalion seems the most volatile because out of all of the characters, I don't think, like, if you're good at the game, you're confident in piloting it. At least on Mac and Vanessa that I've played a lot, it feels like you shouldn't ever end up in a scenario where, unless you have like freak RNG, you end up just not being able to win any PvPs early. Very rarely happens. But on Pygmalion, if you get like a tough beat of people with just really strong burn or poison boards and you don't have anything amazing to go against it, you can just be 0 and 5. Which is why it's so hard to like evaluate. I've definitely personally felt like Mac is the most consistent. I'm able to have a really high win rate on him, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of people say that they feel like it's tough to manage to close it out on Mac, and I know a lot of people say that Vanessa is the most powerful because, of course, especially like holsters and shot glasses are pretty ridiculous items. But at the same time, I've found that she can be a little bit inconsistent because her direction is so vague, and she's one of the only heroes where sometimes I just feel like I couldn't figure anything out and then I died. So it's very like hard to gauge for that reason because if you get 10 wins consistently, every single loss is like insanely punishing in my eyes.
Yeah.
well, if
So
I
what
had to
about
rate
Dually
them, I would.
Prismat? Okay, sorry, Walter, you
Oh
go ahead
yeah,
first.
can I give my ratings?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put Vanessa at a very slight strongest, like strongest but barely stronger than Pig, and then I put Mac and Dooley tied behind both of those two. And I think that it is because, in my mind, I think that Vanessa is has a strong build at each point in the game. Now, each of those are not the same strong build, so you have to be a skilled player to move between those stages of the game, and I think that that's cool. Like, I think that's really good. Like, that's good from a like a gameplay point of view. That said, like, Shark Claws is too good. Like, there's a couple other cards that just like feel a little stupid. Like, I still kind of think the like flagship single weapon is stupid in a way. Like it um so I think that that's kind of where I'm rating her barely ahead of Pig. The reason I rate Pig also quite high is because, yeah, I just think Pig is crazy scaling, and he just goes under the radar because something like half or more of the player base is unwilling to play him. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just the
Yeah.
kind of like, there's some players who you could never convince them to use Ledger, and maybe I'm like one of those players, right? Because I don't really play Pig. I mean, I have played Pig, but I don't really play Pig. It's like this card is busted in half. Ledger is so OP. It's crazy. Um, it's extremely tedious to use, and I think a lot of players are just not willing to do it. So you have this like situation where Vanessa's overrepresented because she's the free to play character and because she's strong, and then Pig is underrepresented, even though I think he is close to as good, if not better. But I'm gonna rate Vanessa as higher just because it's like it just feels like I just play against Vanessa
I
70% of the
think
time, straight up.
personally, honestly, I think Mac is the strongest. And it's just because I think a lot of it for me might come down to the fact that he still only has 100 cards and his card quality on average is very high. So while he doesn't necessarily have any builds that I would say stand out as like insanely good, and I know this isn't true for like everyone, but so far on Mac, I have yet to lose a femur run across 60 games. Um, every time that I find one of the good enough Mac boards, it consistently gets me to 10 wins. Even if it just means that I'm playing Frozen Flame, even if it means I'm playing Mustav Probiscus, I've yet to experience that same feeling on Mac where I feel like I couldn't find anything and I died. Like, I think one of my only losses like that were the first game that you coached me on Gold Skill Start, Walter, and that one felt like exceptionally unlucky to me. That's been like a
I mean, that
freak
definitely was an
accident.
exceptionally
Yeah.
unlucky run.
So
But I do think that you can definitely find nothing and die on Mac. I don't think that
and
like
that's why I'm so like not
it can
confident
happen.
in my answer, because at least I can say that in 60 games of playing Mac, that virtually never happens to me. By far the least of any character that I've ever played at any point in the Bazaar, bar like Dooley at his strongest, is the only time that I have had as consistent results as I currently do on Mac.
I mean, on the OP Dooley patches, I definitely felt like Dooley could never be in that situation either. Like on
Yeah.
the patches where Drill was really good and Rays were really good and Blizzard was really good, you also were like you didn't brick on Dooley if you went to the right shops. So I get what you're saying, but I think that like man, Mac can definitely. It's not even that he can brick; it's that he can be stuck with a build that doesn't necessarily get you to 10. Like it's more like that, right? It's like you get put on Mustaf, which is like I I don't hate Mustaf. It's like a good item, but it's not an item that's good for being on your board on day 12. And you have to find a way out of it or find a way to get a really insane version of it that can win. And I think that can be tough. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's just that's my perspective. I've
Yeah,
also
I
played a
wish I had
ton
like
of
the
Mac.
time to put in like 100 games on this patch, just so that I could like be more confident in my answer. That's why it's annoying how I can only answer based on like what I've actually had be my results, which is that Mac feels really good. Ugh. But
Yeah,
It's not
for
quite
me
as
it's
Prismat,
bad.
yeah, like
go on. Yeah,
you're the principal Dooley player here. How do
Oh
you
yeah.
actually feel he compares like power level wise to the rest of the field?
I think he's not that far behind. I need to cook a lot more with the core. I think that has the most potential to be broken.
Yeah.
But I think he always has the high roll, force field, bunker builds, and he always has ignition core to carry him through the mid game.
And like
But
from your perception, out of the other heroes, which have you felt are the ones that are like most consistently scary to you? Like which seems like the strongest from the bottom?
I think it depends on which phase of the game. Like Vanessa in the
Yeah.
early game is pretty unbeatable, and
Mhm.
then the Mac mid game is stronger overall, and then Pig late game. I don't think it's been any one particular hero that's been beating up Dooley
I mean, hey, that's always
so
a
much.
good sign for
Yeah.
the overall health of the meta.
Yeah, I will say
Yeah,
I do think that
there
like
is
it's
no
very
there's no like
close regardless.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
it's
no you
definitely
click on this
close.
hero and you click on this build and then you win
There's
the way
no
that it used to
surprise
be.
that we're having such different answers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think maybe Mac has the most potential to be the best, but he's kept in check for the same reason kind of that Dooley had the weakness where he has a really slow start time. You can get cheesed by a lot of builds in the late game,
I
but
think
he does have the invulnerability to counteract that.
with Vanessa, it's one of those where like I the bad runs on Vanessa feel quite bad. Not quite on the level of like a pig brick run, but comparable. Whereas the good runs where I've just felt like something came together really well, she seems insanely powerful. And I think it's just one of those where I gotta get the reps in to where I can get a good feeling for what the actual like ratio of the good ones to the bad ones is supposed to be. Whereas on Mac, a lot of the time your lines are just so straightforward that if you're comfortable with the character, it's fairly easy to find ways of just reliably making it work. Whereas I could see that if I could consistently get into the builds that I feel are strong on Vanessa, I would probably start rating her really highly. Like if I could just play Keg every run. I think she's the best hero in the game by far because that item is nuts. But then in practice, it's been very like, oh no, I'm falling behind and I don't find my one viable late game pivot. I appear to have died. So it's like, I think that variance is just, yeah.
Is that a big thing on Vanessa where you hit like day 8 or so and you have a really strong mid game build, but then health pools get too high and you just can't keep up with them?
That's what I'm trying to determine because at the same time, I had a game yesterday. I'm just gonna put it on the screen just for reference. But I was playing basically what I would consider just generic good stuff Vanessa. It's like an early board of the week, but all I have here is I have Mr. Johnson, I have Zoracid, I have Pufferfish, I have Silver Dive Weights with no additional ammo, a Silver
No, you
Yeti
just called
Crab.
him Mr. Johnson.
Oh, Mr. Richardson, yes. It's one of those, like... I think I get confused because he looks like Pippi
That's too
Longstocking's monkey, but he has a different name, so I keep always getting confused with which name he
Don't worry.
has.
Sorry for interrupting. That
No,
just
no,
was
it's fine.
okay.
And it's like a silver Yeti crab. It's a silver puffer fish, and then the miscellaneous, like shot glasses, amulet, holsters. And so this board, like, none of the item rarities are that crazy. It was a fairly late inorexable from memory. It wasn't like on level 4. So none of my values were like insane. But with this build, I was demolishing people on like day 12, day 13. I was beating like Obsidian Flagship with Iron Sharpens Iron. I was beating like, yeah, all kinds of boards that at least personally I would consider very strong. But even though I was just playing pufferfish and doing poison stuff, I could still beat them quite confidently, which has made me feel more uncertain, I suppose, about my evaluations in terms of which boards scale well or not. Where I can't tell if the problem is that she doesn't have enough of them, or if the problem has been that I haven't been able to find the lines into them. Because it's mainly, especially been whenever I try to play Elemental Depth Charge and I don't have enough scaling for the stats on it, or if I end up on Lighthouse and I don't find my burn skills, or things like that. Trebuchet, I've been losing Trebuchet with Shark Claws, I keep getting 10 wins because you scale the damage and it's really easy to win. But every time I've tried to go Trebuchet without already having scaling solved, and this used to be the same thing with like Flagship Vanessa, at the end of the day, the hardest question to solve on her is scaling. And it's become so difficult because most of the time you have to rely on skills, and with the changes to all of the skill vendors, it's hard to reliably find the skills that you need, and ergo your consistency suffers as a result, which is one of the reasons why Keg tends to feel so good when you hit it, because the only question you need to solve is crit, which you can do with a lot of fairly generic things, and then you just need to slam burn things on your board. But yeah, that's been like the large dilemma for me, is I think if you are able to consistently find ways to scale your Vanessa boards into the final few days, she's probably really strong. I've been able to do it in like half of my runs, which is why I end up feeling like it's a complete stomp where I win very easily, or I fizzle out and struggle hard.
All right, and for Dually Prismat, like I'm just gonna ask you, how do you compete on Dually in the late game? Like, if you find yourself on day 14 or day 13, are you still playing Ballista, or like how does Dually compete at that point in the game, or do you just go for like 10-0s generally? Like, what is the
No,
plan there?
he's not been strong enough to get any 10-0s for me so far. But I think
Okay.
fiber optics and a few other of his gold starting items, if you can get the chrono barrier, items like that can really help you in the late game. It's similar to Mac,
Yeah,
where Mac has library and laboratory, where Dooley has those late game items that he can abuse to scale his boards way higher.
yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I think that's a pretty appropriate time to move on to the board of the week, where Prismat has provided us one. This is a clip, so sorry to any audio only listeners, but we'll still, as per usual, talk a little bit about the build after the clip. I'm just gonna play it here. I see you're playing the rare remote control on your board, Ivan.
Yeah, I found this remote control really early on before I even had the charging station. But then I found the charging station and managed to put together this infinite build.
Oh, this is awesome! Wow, that is such a cool build. At first, I didn't understand what was going to happen, but so you're infinitely chaining the. I guess you can walk us through the items one by one, if you want
Yeah,
to.
so I don't know
Like,
if I ended up hovering over my core cooldown in this clip, but I think it was below 3 seconds, which is a big
Right.
part of it. And so every single one of my items is charging or activating another item. And the end result is whenever my core activates, I'm going to get half of a remote control activation, a bit more than that. I have the thrusters on it. And then as long as my core is getting activated by my other items that are getting charged, then it basically goes infinite. Arc Blaster's getting charged, and then it has the fiber optics, which also charges the remote control, and then 2 LEDs.
There you go.
yeah,
That
that's
makes
such a sick build.
sense. Yeah, there's just a lot more you can do combo-wise with, as you pointed out, with the core especially. Now that you can get that to a low enough cooldown to be meaningfully different from, something like a battery in the late game, I can see how that has a lot of potential.
I
Because
see that you
it's
have hyper focus as a skill. Did you utilize that at all, or was it just you
no,
just
it
picked it
came
up but
after the
couldn't play
charging
it?
station,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah, that would have been pretty cool to use as well. But you can get even lower cooldown on the cores on Dually now compared to back when knee brace was a thing, when you could stack
Right.
even higher cooldown reduction off of knee brace.
I think it's also very worth pointing out that for items that gain cooldown reductions with rarity, it's become extra powerful to get any form of early cooldown reduction from loot items on them, because you kind of get to almost have that knee brace style effect still.
Also,
Yeah,
this
it's a
is kind
similar
of
mechanic.
related to that, is that if you're playing Mac and you have boiling flask, it can be pretty sweet to like use it
Yeah,
as like an
yeah.
old school knee brace, and you can really get your potion cooldowns crazy low by putting boiling flask on them, then using feathers on them or wings on them,
There
and
you go,
then
yeah.
taking them off the boiling flask. Yeah, I mean you could
Dually
do it with
also has the
Robotics
world's
Factory
most
and stuff too.
yeah, the most expensive knee brace of all time on Dually.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's more relevant on Mac because the gold boiling flask, which is actually better for it since it adds 2 seconds of cooldown, is only 16 gold, and you can realistically like carry it around in
Yeah.
the later portions of the game to
It's like
actually
almost
do this.
utilizable tech on Vanessa with the shipwreck. So many of
Yeah,
your
but
items are
there's just such
aquatic.
a huge it's such a huge difference between carrying around the large 24 gold
Yeah.
versus the 16 gold medium. But yes, you could technically use it with Robotics Factory
I
and Shipwreck
think
too, and
like
Forge.
it could at least shipwreck. I could theoretically see if it was late enough in the game, that you have the inventory space, and you think you might find like a Hattie or a Monster Ranch or something. I could see it technically being worth it, but it also hedges on you actually finding the damn shipwreck. So we'll see
Yeah,
if
well,
anyone
you don't
ever
have to
actually does that.
like play for it, but if you have 150 gold and you come across the shipwreck and you got the inventory
Yeah,
space
it's
for
like,
it,
oh,
you
I
can.
know, might as well,
So
right?
Yeah.
what I'm hearing here is that they should actually revert the robotic factory change because they buffed it. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
totally,
actually,
It's now a
exactly
stash
yeah,
that
it's
item.
too
for
good now.
sure.
Yeah,
Robotics
it's
Factory
too
is a
broken.
stash item. Okay, actually, if you
Yeah.
get the deadly one, it's bugged to give your friends 4 seconds of extra cooldown. So that's even more insane knee brace.
Yeah.
Nice
All right.
one. Yeah, that about wraps us up. We can do our socials before the end of the episode. To start us off, Prismat, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Prismat. Not particularly active on other socials.
Fair enough. And Walter, what about you?
You can find me lurking around I feel like I didn't go to Sixten's chat this week, so I'll say I was in MetallFenix's chat.
Yo, let's go. What about you, Sixten? Where
Sorry.
can you be found?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitch at twitch.tv/2Sixten. I also have a YouTube channel with the same handle and a Discord server that you can join. Yeah, that covers me.
Nice. And me, myself, I am on twitch.tv/MetallFenix, 2 L's and an F, same name as you see on the screen and in the description. I have a Discord as well. Most likely, honestly, when this episode goes live, I might even. By the time you're done listening to this episode, there's a chance I may be streaming. We'll see. We'll see how early I feel like waking up in the morning. But I also have a YouTube channel, and that's almost where I'm the most active currently. It's got the exact same name, and just 15 minutes before we started recording this podcast, I uploaded a very comprehensive Vanessa overview for anyone who's interested in learning more about all of the things that we talked about on the episode today. I've been doing a lot more guide content as of late, and I plan to keep that going. So check out my YouTube channel if you're interested in that stuff. And of course, as a reminder, you can find this podcast on both YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and via RSS feed for your podcast app of choice. With all that said, that'll be it from us. I hope that whoever you are, wherever you are having a wonderful day, morning, evening, or night, and that we see as many as possible of you next week, next Sunday. New guest, new topics. Look forward to it.